It's porting time, my fellow porters. Our dream has finally come true. Dornman Port is here. Oh, your live stream wasn't to visit Dornman Port? Well, I can see why. Look at this. Nonsensical trade routes, no road access to Mondstadt City, poor infrastructure, safety hazards everywhere. Don't even get me started on this windmill. This is supposed to be a major port, so where exactly is everything? Okay, but before we analyze the port itself, let's start at the border between old and new Mondstadt. Excuse me, sir, do you know the way to Dornman Port? Oh, it's that way. Okay, thank you for your help. Everyone, let us take a moment to look at the map. Behold its beauty. And it's not just here that I convinced John Hovers himself to finally fix. He also made sure that the dock over at Mondstadt City is now on the map too. That's right, I got John Hovers to do that 100%, all me. Thank you. I know, I'm the best cartographer in Tevat. But going back to the ruins, they have changed a few things. First, they added a bit more path to the map, but it still just stops again over here and doesn't even lead to the path that might actually be used by Mondstadters down at the beach, as this is the only way anyone is possibly getting over to this piece of land. So they added a part of this path, but this only heads to a dead end, this abandoned village. There is technically a path going through the ruins and leading out to Storm Terror's lair, but this is not accessible whatsoever. The only viable path would be this route that they didn't even put on the map. But even then, there's no indication of this beach being used regularly. With all of these routes, you still run the risk of being turned to mince meat by the ruin guard. On the Dornman side though, they did also add the ruins to the map, so we really are porting all over the map. But oh dear, it just goes downhill from here. No, quite literally, we're going downhill. See, we've concluded that transporting cargo via land just isn't plausible, so this leaves us with one other option, this strait. We've got a bit of a Sumeru waterway situation going on, although this one isn't anywhere near as bad. The worst part is here, where it gets very shallow and tight, so only ships of certain sizes are even getting through that. At Mondstadt City's docks, all we have are small rowboats. Over at the port itself, there are these medium-sized ships, but even then, they don't look like they would fit. But enough horsing around. Let's finally make our way to Port of Dornman and see again, straight away, why have we got carts here? Where are they going? And that's not even the worst of it. Just look at how dangerous this road is. You could easily fall off these stairs. The fencing doesn't even go the whole way around, and this bridge looks like it's hanging on for dear life. However, Mondstadt's problem has always been the lack of obvious industry, barring Dorn Winery. Get it? Barring because taverns and bars and wine. But with Dornman Port, well, Millhaven, we finally get to see their thriving flower production, and it is a stunning sight. Until you get up close and really sniff those flowers. The only flower fields we see are of the windrest flower, one of the primary ingredients used in perfumery and also food. So this would mean that Mondstadt does also have a booming perfume industry. But either way, I think the implication is that they cultivate all sorts of flowers here. Again, we just don't see this. Reading the bulletin board is also interesting because it explains that many fontaine flowers can also be grown in Mondstadt. At Millhaven, they have multiple shops too. A fragrance shop where you can exchange windrest flowers for wind's breath, a special perfume. Using this even triggers special dialogue with certain NPCs. For example, this perfumer you can find from Snezhnaya over here. She mentions how she is a perfumer from Snezhnograd. There is so much Snezhnaya lore in Dornman, by the way. She is attempting to recreate a fragrance that was supposedly worn by Strivoja, the first Grand Duchess of the Vila, and that the Belyid Tsar, the first Cryo-Archon, was captured by her stink, her perfume. They also have a small restaurant where you can eat and enjoy the view, even with their own specialty meal, the Millhaven breakfast, which, if you've done the boar quest, then you know they have a lot of boars in this part of Mondstadt too. Dornman. Mondstadt sure loves their boars. And actually, just outside of the port, you can find a hunter who I can only assume is related to Draf and Diona, and he even mentions the pigeon system. These windmills though. Guys, surely there's a limit, right? So how many windmills did you want? Yes. I know Mondstadt is the region of wind and all, but you guys don't need all of these windmills. You're producing flowers. Windmills are generally used for grinding grains or providing power. I mean, if windrest flowers are used in food, does this mean that they're ground up? However, the one explanation we could give is that they're being used for irrigation. This region is, after all, inspired by the Netherlands. Here, they use windmills and pumping stations to pump water away after floods. These windmills, though, I'm pretty sure are purely for decoration. Taking a look around the village introduces another problem though. I think they took ground floor a little too seriously. No, the actual problem is this water wheel. As we can see, it is being powered properly. You can see the currents moving along the stream pretty fast, but it's just attached to this building. Like, what is this for? John Hovas is just having a laugh at this point. And do you want to know the worst part in all of this? There are even some actual farms in the region. Only problem is, aside from one, they're all completely abandoned. There is so much to cover when it comes to Dornman himself. I could port forever. So let's start with the bad, then we can cover all the incredible parts I am in love with after to soften the port. I mean, blow. My main issue with this port, as a certified inspector and tevatologist, is the safety. First off, I'm in love with this bridge. It gives a sense of grandiosity and history to the place, with the patterns, the unlit braziers, and just the sheer size of it. Timmy? Is that you?
We never cry.
And this is also where you'll notice that a large portion of Dornman Port is actually built upon an ancient civilization. This is very unified civilization stonework we've got going on here. Comparable to Salvindagnir, you can even see the outline of the fort from above. Therein lies the crux though. We can see it is literally falling apart. So many walls and towers crumbling. Look at this ceiling. That is a huge safety risk for anyone walking underneath. Here you could end up falling and find yourself right at the edge of a cliff. They've stuck another ornamental windmill onto the base of an unstable tower. And just what is this? No safety railings here. That is a long drop. I need to speak to whoever is in charge here. Oh, he's busy trying to get shot? Yeah, that checks out. Better yet, how about purchasing a house that you can't even access? Here's the keys to your house. Where's the door though? Also, do you notice anything out of the ordinary on this lighthouse? Yeah, a giant windmill. Guys, this windmill addiction has to stop somewhere. Get some help. How is the lighthouse supposed to function properly when part of it is obstructed? They have a lot of cranes everywhere too, which is great of course. It's a port, makes sense. You always need those. But some of the placements don't make sense either, like this one. And over at this part of the port, you can kind of see how they've just kind of laid out wooden platforms on top of the stonework, and these poles here are holding it up. Going back to the main road of the port, if we head further in, you'll find it doesn't get much better. In the direction of the docks, there is a huge wooden staircase with almost no railing. All along here, no railings either. But here is a very cool part. I love this. At least it's cool to me, okay? Just roll with it. The stonework of the pathing changes. And this is where we start to see a newer part of the city, which also seems to be where most people live now. And the actual old fort is just used for trade and for the knights. Dornman Port, like most recent cities in Genshin, again has a very layered design. So even if it is rather small, it doesn't feel like it, especially with everything being so compact. In the town square, or a circle, there are different houses compared to the ones in Mondstadt, and so much more detail to make it feel truly lived in. Clutter everywhere, in every corner, and on the houses themselves. Oh, and lots of sitting spots. Bonus points for that. Here's my personal favourite. I think they're gonna have trouble opening this door. Like, look from up top here. It really isn't all that much, but see how the pathing is layered throughout so that when you're wandering the streets, you feel very immersed and like you could get lost. There's a restaurant run by an NPC from Nordcry who, if you talk to her while wearing the perfume, mentions how she used to be in a gang back in Nordcry until she met Katja, the owner of the Speranza.
If you ask me what's the one place you should visit in Nasha Town, obviously I'm gonna say Speranza.
Who more or less convinced her to leave that life behind her. We have Fragrant Whispers, a flower shop, whose owner is also friends with Flora back in Mondstadt City. There's also a tavern down at the docks that is basically the opposite of Angel's Share, down to the signage. Now, the port is the most important part of Dornman Port, is literally in the name, and I found some interesting things wandering around it. Well, aside from the very dangerous and unstable pier that needs fixing, like merchants seem to be selling mainly mainly produce, fish, and there's also a Snezhnaya merchant selling firewater, where we get another small lore drop that the Fae are the ones that craft it. The only ships you can find at the port are all Mondstadt ones. One sec guys, one sec. According to the loading screen, as one of the continent's major trade hubs, it welcomes a steady stream of merchant ships from various nations. Are these ships at the port with us? All of these ships have the same symbol on them too, and my likely guess would be they represent whatever authority is in charge of the port, which might be the Dornman's Haven family. They seem to be in charge of the place, and are actually a branch of the Gunhilda family. There's quite a bit of Gunhilda lore at this port. The land used to be a fief of the Gunhilda clan, according to Hannah lore. Hey, why does the Gunhilda clan have fiefs though? Get it? No. And the clan established the very first sanctuary in Dornman port, so this would essentially be the origin of the Church of Favonius. However, it was torn down during the age of the aristocracy and then never rebuilt, so the only place the nuns can now practice is in front of the Fishing Association building, as it's built on top of where the sanctuary used to be, which is hilarious. There's even a graveyard underneath the town for all of the knights that fell during the cataclysm that you find while doing the windmill quest. Talking to NPCs gives so much new lore and port building as well. I mean world building. I've got to give it to Hoyo. I love how lively they've made the place feel. Not just with the amount of NPCs, but how much things change. The playable characters move too. All the mini side quests, even something as simple as finding this girl's fish. You can find NPCs from every single region at the port. The most common people, aside from Mondstadters, are Leoians, of course, because they're the closest. There are very few Fontanians here, which gets even more confusing because the bulletin board kind of insinuates that there is a connection between Lumiduce Harbour and Dornman Port. Yes, we are going back to the bulletin board. These boards always have some of the coolest niche details. I love you, bulletin board. They don't get you like I do. Basically, there's a post mentioning an illegal musket smuggling operation where they're going through Lumiduce Harbour. So riddle me this. How does this work when there is a giant waterfall in the way? There has to be a lift of some kind. However, we do have a Port Belavogi mention multiple times too. So I can only conclude that this means there is a connection between the two ports and that it is somewhere further up north. And actually, there is another post by the Feyun Commerce Guild, which is where the port is mentioned again, but due to internal planning adjustments within the guild, the shipping route previously operating to Port Belavodia has been temporarily suspended. So it sounds like there's been some problems, but there is more info on what sort of goods tend to come from Snezhnaya through this port. Fae-crafted items, and these are apparently very high quality and expensive. Also precious metal works, going back to what an NPC at Liyue Harbour brings up, as well as antiques. We did have information about this port too before this expansion from research notes found at Nothing Passage. It says, forget a few million mora, even 5% of all the income from Port Belavodia wouldn't be too much to ask, so they make a lot of mora essentially. This post being made by the Feyun Commerce Guild though bugs me, because why is it they have such a presence at Port Ormos, even an entire stand, but nothing of the sort at Dornman Port? Then there's a post about more smuggling, which might explain actually what's going on over at Port Belavodia. At the diplomatic request of the Snezhnograd Vici, all ships arriving from Snezhnaya must now register the ship owner's identity, any cargo being transported, and the purpose of entry upon docking. Something certainly seems to be afoot. The knight standing there has plenty of dialogue too, where he goes into a lot of detail about the technology and new guns that the knights are using. The muskets they're using now in the ranged company and combined arms company are produced by the support company and incorporate technology from Fontaine and Snezhnaya, but that they're not quite on the level of the Fatui, for example, and you can see this just by looking at their designs. He also has a dialogue saying how he's lost a cargo shipment where the merchants were meant to transport the shipment overland. So, if I were to give Dornman Port an overall safety score based on its problematic infrastructure, smuggling, and this windmill, it would be an Apollon Lohen's head out of 10. The infrastructure is what really lets it down here, I'm afraid. But if we're scoring purely based on vibes, Dornman Port gets a 10 out of 10. Dornman Port, it makes you feel things. It makes me feel like I'm home again, being back in Mondstadt. And through all of the jokes, I really am loving loving the pure amount of detail they've put into it. Now all that's left is to order a fish harbour burger and sit and enjoy the sunset.